All right, welcome everyone. This is now session 4. So today we're going to continue the exercise we started last week. Now, I have spoken to the class already, but for external students, just to let you know that I won't be running a class next Thursday the 21st. So there'll be no face-to-face class, hence no class recording. So, as I said to the class just then, we will actually quite easily be able to catch up on this initial learning with the looking at creating materials. So what I plan to do is we will continue working through that exercise today and possibly not next Thursday but the Thursday after, to complete this portion of your learning. So today we're going to complete the carpet material that we started last week. We're then going to have a look at generating a material for a paint colour. From there we're going to have a look at creating a material for tiling. Now, within this particular exercise, which is this one here, for instance, with the carpet materials, there are in fact 3. So I'm going to show you how to do one, and in your own time you can then complete the other 2. The same as when we move forward to the section on paint. You've actually got 5 paint materials to potentially create. I'm going to show you how to do one, and then in your own time you can go through and then create the other 4. All right, it is, and that'll reinforce the learning hopefully. So you'll start to understand obviously how materials are created and how you can actually sort of create your own when required. So let's pick up where we left off last week. So again, just to clarify, no class next Thursday the 21st. All right. Now, we were at a point last week where we had gone to the Interface website, which is a manufacturer of carpet products. Prior to that, we had downloaded a Revit starting file for use to create these materials. We had created a folder structure which looks like this. So I got you to create a folder called Texture Maps. The last thing we did last session was to download a zip file. So hopefully you've all done that. Now just let me turn on file extensions. Now that, so if you can, I presume everyone knows what a zip file is, a .zip file. So the zip file that you downloaded contains other files which need to be unpacked, and what they're asking you to do is to actually extract a single file called Cologne 6363 Heat Variation 1. It is to be used within our new carpet material. Okay, so you can appreciate that it is simply a photograph of the carpet square itself. So if you can double click on the zip file, locate the file that you need, and just extract that one JPG file into this particular folder, and just get it ready so that when we go back to Revit we can then link it to our new material. Okay, so this one here. Now it is listed or referred to on page 27, so it's that one there. Okay, so double click on the zip file in File Explorer and copy paste to your project folder. Yeah, so coming back to the zip file, if I go back a step and double click here, and then if I then right mouse on the file and say copy, and then just paste into here, which so it's already there basically, but I'll paste it and replace it. Okay, so it's now outside the zip file as a JPG, ready for use. So once you've done that, can you, we'll then go back to Revit. Alright, so if you can then return back to Revit, we're going to do something called duplicate an asset. So I'll talk you through that. So the Revit file that we downloaded and are using is the one called Revit Materials Tutorial 2014, which is from the Learn site. Okay. If we go to Manage and Materials, if you recall, we created a material, or started to create a material called CPT1, Carpet 1. To date, what we've done is we've hopefully filled in the identity information. So that was interface floor. The model was Cologne Pete 6363. The class, I don't know that we have a class for this. We could call it textile. Oh, there's carpet. Yes, yeah, carpet. Good. Yeah, so perfect. So when you are creating a new material, if you do have a class that you can pop it into, that makes it easier for searching. And the comments were public spaces, was that correct? Now this information that I'm putting in here was or is referred to up here. If we sort of step back, so class is carpet, the comments public spaces, the manufacturer is interface floor, the model is Cologne 12420. Well, I also put the Pete 6363 in. Just the more information that you can put in, the better. Under Mark, if we put in CPT1, please disregard the keynote, so nothing in keynote. The URL, did you get the URL from the website last week? Good. So copy that in. Good. Yeah, probably help if I was on the right material there. I thought I'd put it in. Sorry, I was on the wrong one there. Yeah, so I thought I was going. I thought I'd done it. I was sure I had done it. So yeah, all good. So Pete 6363. So the more information that you can add, the better. So that's as far as we got last week. So what they're asking us to do is to click on the Appearance tab. Next. So the Appearance tab is the part of the material that controls how the material looks when we render or change the visual style to realistic, when we're looking at an object that has this material assigned to it. And essentially the Appearance tab is made up of something called an Appearance asset. And the Appearance asset, is this. So it's the preview. Well, it'll come up in the preview. It contains information about the asset itself. Assets are divided up into a class as well. So this one is generic. So depending on what type of material you're creating, it might, and when we get to paint, you'll actually see that we actually use an appearance asset that's called paint or wall paint. It's better to use a more specific appearance asset when you're doing this, because you're going to get greater control of the material in terms of the things that you can change that relate to the product. So, and we'll see that when we actually get to paint and tile materials. So you get you get more the ability to change more specific aspects of that appearance asset. So at the end of the day, that the material that you create has to sort of, has to be what I call real world. So it has to be as accurate as possible. So what we do essentially, and this is the key to this, is that if you are duplicating an existing material, you must also duplicate the appearance asset and create a completely new one. So why do we do that? Well, it's because the appearance asset can be shared by more than one material within a project. All right. So if you change any part of the appearance asset, it's going to impact any other materials that are using it. Now, see the hand up the top here? This one's called red. The hand up the top here with a number in it means that one other material is sharing this appearance asset. Okay, so there is an impact. So the objective here is to duplicate the appearance asset called red and create our own, which is exactly what we're going to do. So start off by duplicating the material, putting in your descriptive information. So obviously you rename it, put in all your information, put in the URL if you can, and then go to the Appearance tab and then duplicate. So in clicking that icon there, you'll see that this is now called red in brackets 1. So it's given it, automatically renamed it. Notice that the number above the hand is set to 0, so it's unique. Okay, so always look for that number. So it should be set to 0. And the first thing you do is in the information section, so you may need to expand it, is to actually give the appearance asset a new name as well. So I guess in most cases the appearance asset name is going to be the same name as the material itself. So CPT1 in other words. So there's a question, what happens when you duplicate or create a duplication and it still has the number 1 there? Is that the question?
Yeah, one or two.
1 or 2, even if you've duplicated? If you then go to another, if you click duplicate again, so if I click duplicate again, it then goes to CPT1, well this one is now CPT1 in brackets 1, okay? If you don't do this correctly the first time, it can get a bit messy, okay? So you need to sort of know where you are with this sort of stuff. Now, I'll perhaps, now the thing is that I've now created another one, another copy of this one, okay? So what you need to do is actually, I guess, click apply and, oh, okay, that's because, sorry, that's because of that. That's a side issue, sorry, my apology. So apply and OK. Now, I guess when you are working with appearance assets, appearance assets are also parts of the project as well, or parts of the family. So they exist as separate entities, which means you can actually remove them from the family or project, but you have to do them through a process of purging. Okay. So the only way to sort of resolve conflict issues with appearance assets is to go to the Manage tab, Purge Unused, this one here. Just be careful with this, because if you actually click OK at this stage, you're going to actually get rid of 395 individual objects in the project, which may not be ideal. So it's always best just to click the check none option. Okay. Purging is something that we have looked at before, but you may not remember it. It's a way of clearing out the project. If we go down, if we just collapse families and views, see under other styles here, you've got materials, and you also got appearance assets. See, material assets, appearance. So it's possible to actually remove an entire material from the project if it's not in use, and it's also possible to actually clear out any redundant appearance assets. So if you've made copies here that you need to get rid of appearance assets, you can tick them and then click OK. So it depends on whether the appearance asset you've just created is there in the list there. Is that the case?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So anything you want to get rid of, just tick here and then click OK, and it will actually clear out that appearance asset. So that's the only way to sort of resolve duplicate issues with appearance assets, to clear them from the project, if that helps. Okay. It might be that you know, you might actually have to perhaps clear the entire material before you can clear the appearance asset, because the material's holding on to the appearance asset, and you might then have to just start again. Okay, so you do whatever works. Alright, so I'm going to cancel that. Go back to materials. Search by class, choose carpet. Okay, so there's my material there. Back to the appearance asset. Now I'm back to red here because perhaps I didn't save the previous appearance asset. So I'll just duplicate that one again and see if I can just put in the CPT1 and apply. Okay, so it's happy now. Obviously I didn't save it before. So duplicate, okay, rename to CPT1. So the objective is to get that number back to 0. All right. So when you're working when you're working with the material, if you just want to keep the dialog box open but save anything that you do, just click the apply button. Okay. If you make further changes, the apply button will be available. So just keep clicking it so that you save your work. But ultimately, to save the material, you've got to save the Revit project file. Okay. So if you've done all this work creating all these beautiful materials and you close the dialog but then don't save the project file, you don't have anything. Okay, so you've got to save the project file. Alright, so moving forward, we're at this point here now. We've got this JPEG now in our texture maps folder. So we know where that is. We have duplicated the asset, the appearance asset. We've got the 0 sitting up here. We've now got a new name for it, of course. You can pop in the description as Cologne in brackets 12420. So you do that with the appearance asset as well. And the next stage, which is page 28, you're going to go down to the generic section and you're going to click directly on a link to the texture map that currently supports this appearance asset. So in most cases, the appearance asset has a direct link to a photograph that gives it its appearance. Not always though. Okay. So let me just, so that was Cologne. 12420. I mean, in the keywords, you could probably change the color from, say, red to brown. Now, in the generic section here, so we've got this, see this link here? So this is the current texture map. So click on the text here, which will then take you out to the File Browser Explorer. And this is where you actually look in and navigate back to that new JPEG that you extracted from that zip file.
Russell, could you
Yep, so
That's where I am with you.
yep, so down here, so click this link here.
Sorry, I lost one.
Yeah, click this link here. So effectively what we're doing is we're replacing the current texture map with our new one. So we'll just quickly navigate back to okay, it's a fair way back. Now ideally when you're doing this it's best to have your texture maps in a folder location that's on a fixed computer. It's not ideal to have them on a USB device that you're going to unplug, because ultimately, if you load up your Revit project file and you don't have that, if you don't have the USB available that has the texture map on it, or it's a different drive letter, different computer, Revit's not going to be able to find the texture map, so it'll come up blank. So these are the inherent problems you have when you're, with moving around with this, with materials and texture maps. So if you're moving from one computer to another, you've got to go through a process of relinking, which I can talk about later. And invariably, when you actually run a render, for instance, you might have seen in the past when you render something that it comes up with errors saying it can't find particular JPEG files. It'll actually list them because it just doesn't know where they are. Okay, so you have to go through this process of relinking. So click open, and then you'll see how this all changes. Okay. Now, the only other thing that we really need to do is a couple of things we really need to do at this point, and one of the important ones is scale. So many of the texture maps that you use are going to represent the product at a certain size. So if you don't get the scale right, you're going to get some unexpected results, particularly when it comes to things like bricks and tiles. So the last thing you want is to create a material for brick walls and have your bricks really tiny. Okay. So the aim is to obviously know the size of a brick, for instance, and know approximately how many bricks you're going to see in a wall that's sort of 2.7 meters high, and adjust the scale accordingly. It's the same with this particular material, because this carpet square is manufactured at a set size. Did anyone pick up on the size?
24 by 24. 248 by 248.
No, I think it was a bit bigger than that. I'm sure it was bigger than that. Yeah. So it does tell you. It does actually tell you in the exercise, but it was actually 50 centimeters by 50 centimeters, or 500 mil by 500 mil. Now the thing is, to actually work or to change the scale, you click directly on the image here, which opens up a texture editor. Now if you expand the texture editor, you'll see that this particular sample is measuring 381 by 629. Now we have to adjust the size to 500 by 500. Okay. Now you'll do that down here in the scale section. So you've got your size down here, which matches the size up here. Now, what you'll need to do before you actually physically type in 500 millimeters, you'll need to click this icon over here. Don't know how well you can see that, but this one here. Okay, so just unlock the aspect ratio. Go into the width setting of the sample size and type in 500 and hit the tab key. Drop down to the height section and also type in 500.
Mine doesn't start 500.
Yeah, you'll need to actually unlock the aspect ratio. So this button here will go from blue to clear. Alright, so a relatively simple change there. Click done.
Yeah, I did do that.
So we now know that when we use that material, it's going to present at the correct scale. Now the only other thing we need to do with this material is just go back to the graphics tab and I guess as far as a surface pattern is concerned, we can leave the foreground pattern as sand, but when you assign the material to a floor surface, for instance, note that in the hidden line visual style, you'll actually see a sand pattern on the object. Now, it's up to you, but that will give you a clear indication that there is a material assigned to that object. Okay, you won't necessarily know what it is unless you actually change to the realistic visual style or check the type properties of the object. So the only other thing we do up here is actually tick use render appearance. So in, I guess, 98% of cases with materials, that's what you would do. You know, use this option. So in some cases, you know, if you don't tick that, then the color just stays grey. And then when you assign the material and then shade it, it just stays grey, and you sort of think, okay, well, did I assign a material or didn't I? So that one. So click apply, and that completes that particular material. So from here, if you're going to work through and create the other two, which we won't in class, you would simply just right mouse on this one and duplicate. But remember, if you're copying the material, you must copy the appearance asset. Do it immediately, because by duplicating the material, it's not a given. So if you make a copy of this one and you go to the appearance tab here, and let's say this is the copy, if I copy this one and come to this tab here, it'll say CPT1 and it'll have a 1 above it. So it means that two materials are sharing the same appearance asset. So until you actually make a copy of this one in the new material, you won't get back to 0. So the copy will be CPT1 in brackets 1 until you call it CPT2. Does that make sense?
I've done that CPT 2 and CPT3 and then duplicated the appearance, and then I go back to CPT1 and it still says it's shared by 2 other materials? Is that because they share similar properties? Or?
No, no. I mean, if I was to duplicate this one and call this one CPT2, so I'm down here now. See how that's now going? That's now 1.
Yeah.
So if I duplicate this, it creates CPT1 in brackets 1.
Yeah.
But if I come back down to here and call this one 2, see how that remains at 0?
Yeah.
So it depends. You must have done something. Along the way.
Yeah.
So.
But if you go back to CPT1 now, is that sharing? Yes, and now that's
Oh,
sharing.
it is okay.
That's what I'm asking, because I don't know if it's.
Oh, don't know. Yeah, don't know. Unless it comes back to the image that they're sharing.
Okay.
Okay, that could be the case. But in theory, that should go back to, that should be 0. But it'd be interesting to see what happens when we change the actual JPEG to something new. Yeah. But yeah, so I'm not sure about that one. Okay, so yeah, so I'll let you, in your own time, create those other 2 carpet materials. What I'd like to do now is actually move on and have a look at paint. All right. So I'll apply that one. Now, if we go back to the exercise itself, so in the following pages, it just talks about changing the scale, which we've done. So obviously 50 centimeters is the same as 500 millimeters. We've actually switched to the graphics tab and we've ticked use render appearance. Using the steps covered, create 2 more materials, CPT2 and CPT3, as defined on page 424. Okay. All right. So there's just some additional information there. So we move on to page 30. Where we look at painting and coating. So I guess the thing is that when you are setting up your models for presentation, there will be quite a large requirement for you to actually use just plain paint colours. So unless you create them, they obviously won't exist, and they're very hard to find within the default libraries. And typically you're going to want to use very specific colours. So it gets back to the argument, I guess, as to whether you, present your design to a client and you choose to use colour, or leave the entire building plain. So in other words, do you commit yourself or not? So just be careful with that one. If you are using colours, you'll actually make sure that you do use correct colours on your models. But there are a lot of variables in the way colours present. Lighting will change a colour completely. Exterior and interior. I guess the type of computer hardware you use, the computer screen that you use when you're showing your client will actually change the colour quite significantly. I think, has anyone ever had, well, you've got two monitors sitting side by side here in the classroom, but if you've got two screens side by side and they're different brands or different sizes, and you move from one to the other, you can see that you have an enormous difference in colour variation. Okay, so so just be careful with that one. But ultimately, when you are producing paint colours, you want to get them deadly accurate as per the manufacturer specification. And I guess if you've ever done any colour theories, anyone done any colour theory or study? Yeah, it's a whole different set of learning. So you've got, with paint, you've got different bases for paint. You've got black and white to start with, and then you do tinting and shading to make up that colour. So that it's a whole different realm really. But ultimately, the paint colour comes back to, in terms of what we're doing, in terms of graphics, and this is used in programs like Photoshop and other paint programs. Ultimately, when you're producing colours, you can primarily just plug in the three RGB values. So R for red, G for green, B for blue, and you put in a number for each, and then you can produce a colour, which is basically what we're doing for these paint colours. Now the thing is that would sort of gets back to whether or not the paint manufacturer provides those colours to you. If they don't, is there another way of getting those numbers? If you have a sample of the colour in a digital sense. So, does anyone know how you would do that?
You can open it in Photoshop and use the teardrop.
Yes. Yeah, that was the answer I was looking for. Yeah. So you can actually open up the image in Photoshop, for instance, and you can use an eyedropper or some sort of dropper system which will pick up on the colour and then provide you with this information. So that's about the only way that you're going to do it if you don't have the actual numbers. All right. So we're going to have a look at creating this first paint colour, PT1. It's actually from a company called Sherwin-Williams, and the colour is called Classic Ivory. Now remember, these carpets and colours and tiles are produced as a collection of materials that are used in an office space. So they're not terribly exciting. So you've got colours like grizzle grey, classic ivory, bright white, less brown, and familiar beige. So they're not in terms of interior decoration, they're not that exciting. A bit like the colours that we use here in the classroom. All right, just quite neutral. All right. So let's have a look at this. So what we'll do initially is we'll actually sort of just head off to the Sherwin-Williams website. So if you can just probably just as easy to copy the URL. You're going to go to, when you get there, you'll go to Paints, Stains, Colours and Supplies for Architects, Specifiers and Designers. Okay, so paints up. So when you get to the site, paints, stains, colours and supplies. This link here. So Sherwin-Williams, this link here. Then you go to for architects, specifiers and designers. This one here. Okay. Alright, so at this point, if you just go up to the search box here and just do a search for the SW0051. So hopefully if you've done that correctly, you'll come up with this page here. So it's showing you it's got an interior space there using this particular colour, which is good. A lot of the paint manufacturing sites now sort of offer this sort of service, or will show you what the colour looks like in context. So you're going to click on the details button here. Now it's fortunate, I'll just zoom that up, it's fortunate with this particular paint company that they do actually give you the RGB and also the hex value. So if you're looking for other colours, you can quite easily just do a screen capture or just note the RGB and then use that later in Revit. So what they're saying in the exercise itself is if you didn't have those numbers, you'd perhaps sort of download a sample of the colour itself here, or do a screen capture, and then as it was suggested before, load that into Photoshop and use your eyedropper to derive these numbers here from the sample itself. So essentially why we are here at the website is to do either of those two things. Okay, so there's not much more information you can derive from the paint colour itself. What we can do while we're here, these numbers are given to us in the exercise, so we don't have to write them down. But while we're here, what I'll get you to do is perhaps just highlight the URL and just do a Control-C and copy that. Just get that one ready so that when we create our material, you can plug that one in the relevant section within Revit, within the material identity. Which is what we'll do next. So if you go back to your Revit project, now again, to create the paint material, you're going to copy an existing material, and if we go up to the class up here, we're going to look for okay, we might have to do an actual search for a material called gypsum wallboard. I'm not entirely sure. It's actually I'm not entirely sure what class it's inside. But if you type in the word gypsum, Is it coming up for you? Gypsum wall. Okay, it's not coming up for me because I've actually got the class set to carpet. So I can do this all day and I'll never find it. Right? So, and this has caught me out before as well in the past. So if you are searching for something that's not coming up, just check your class. So go back to all, and there it is there. All right, so if you put in a search for gypsum, you can actually just use the word gypsum. So you've got ceiling board and wall board. And I guess their reasoning here is that when you are creating a paint colour, it's always best to start with a material that is intended, or start with a material that is intended to take that paint. So in other words, either some sort of ceiling material or some type of wall material. Now, I don't know that I fully agree with that. I don't think that's entirely necessary, because when you're creating materials, I think it's sometimes better to actually create a material from absolute scratch and build it up from a default and put in all of the relevant information, the shading, the surface patterns, the appearance asset that you want to make that material based on what it is. But for the purpose of the exercise, we're going to go with the wallboard one. You're going to make a copy of it, and you're going to call it, I would much prefer to call it PT1 rather than gypsum wallboard PT1. You could actually call it PT1 classic ivory, which makes more sense to me, so that you know what the colour is before so that when you're choosing it, you know what the colour is. So once you've created the new material, you can go back and rename it. Okay, so PT1 Classic Ivory is the material name. The first thing you're going to, or the next thing you're going to do is actually fill out the identity information. So that's included back up here. It's also, I think they also give you the information here. So just change the class to paint. Comment is walls. Manufacturer is Sherwin-Williams. But don't forget to, before you go any further, just do a Control-V and copy that URL here. Okay, so going back, just pop in the rest of the information there. Disregard the keynote. Right, so once you've put in your identity information, you then switch to the Appearance tab, and you'll notice that for this for this current appearance asset, it says gypsum board painted white. Note the area down here which controls the colour is of a generic nature. So I said previously, it's always best to try and choose a more specific appearance asset for whatever material you're creating. So in this case, we're going to actually not so much duplicate the current one, but we're actually going to replace it with a completely brand new appearance asset, which is another option. So you can either duplicate the current appearance asset if it's suitable, or replace it completely. So Revit does have appearance assets that are set up for wall paint. Okay, so that's what we'll actually go off and look for. So to replace the current appearance asset, we go to this option here, which is replaces this asset, which opens up a secondary dialog called an asset browser. Don't get me wrong, this is enormously complicated. You know, this is, you know, this can get quite, you know, complex. I mean, once you understand how it works, it's not too bad. But just bear in mind that we are not working with physical assets, we're working with appearance assets. So we actually work from the appearance library. There's also a whole host here of physical material structural libraries for different countries. So this one here, the appearance library, is what we're searching or looking in. We specifically go down to wall paint. Now, ultimately, we're going to use the RGB values that Sherwin-Williams has provided us for this particular paint colour, but we need to start somewhere. So we go across to the list here and we choose a colour that's close. So the obvious choice there would be beige. The icon with the double arrows will effectively copy the appearance asset into our project for this particular material. Okay, so click on that icon there. You'll see that that beige appearance asset now sits here. It's got a 0 above it, which means it's the only appearance asset in the project. We don't need to duplicate it. We just need to rename it because it is unique at the moment. No requirement to keep this asset browser open, so we close this one. We've finished with that. So the name of the appearance asset, rather than being beige, we'll actually come down to the information here and change that to, if I can get there, SW space 0051 classic ivory. You could perhaps just leave it as SW0051. They've put the full name in. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm just following the exercise. So if you actually go back to the pages and the exercise, it's exactly what the exercise is asking us to do. You'll see that down here under information, see this part of the appearance asset is quite specific. It's wall paint. It's got a colour, it's got a finish, and it's got an application. So quite simply, all we need to do now is update the RGB values. and we change the finish to eggshell, this one here, and we change the application to roller. So when we're using this paint colour, we cannot use a paintbrush. We must use a roller.
It's a joke. Oh, okay, funny, right.
I did that with a very straight face. All right. No, I'm joking. I'm kidding.
That's for the contractor.
That's for the contractor. Okay.
The designer just pushes a button.
Yes.
An icon.
Yes. We still use the paint tool if we're painting. All right, but it's set to roller. All right. So that will have some bearing on the way the material presents.
Like how much of a difference is?
Only the flies can tell you. Right.
I've been asked that one before then.
Yeah. I don't know. I can't detect the difference. There may be a difference, but it's very, very subtle. All right. So now the colour. We click on the little colour band here. We've got hues, and we've got this information here. We're not going to change any of that. We're just going to plug in the RGB over here. And the RGB we can pick up from the website, or we can pick it up from the page 33, step 49, 242, 226, 195. All right. So that's where we put those numbers in there. So we've changed the finish, the application. Just before we leave appearance, see the line that runs across here, the divisional line there. If you mouse over it, you'll get a double arrow, so you can actually make it larger or smaller. Depending on what the material is, there's a little cube to the side here which allows you to select the thumbnail shape and render quality for the preview. So if we have a look at that quickly, so we've got scene. Now because it's a paint colour designed for, or a paint for walls, we can actually use a preview that shows us a wall with a piece of furniture against it as a preview. We could quite easily change that to a cube. You can if you want to. The other thing that you can do is you can actually change that the preview for particular environments. So you can actually go and say, okay, we'll choose plaza. If it's a wall in a snowfield, or under warm light. Okay, so it gives you an idea of how different that colour looks in different lighting situations. And the other thing you can do is actually go down to the last option, which is render settings, and you can actually change it from draft to production quality to get a much better, sharper image, which I think it's made it worse, but personally. But yeah, so it's still updating, so it's getting better. It's but just be careful with that one, because if you actually have all your previews set to production quality, it's going to make working in this dialogue a lot slower, and there is the potential for crashing. So just be careful with that. When you are doing a lot of work with materials, like anything in Revit or any other program, just come out of the dialogue occasionally. Just make sure that you're okay. Apply an OK. Save your project file and go back in and continue working. So do that regularly. All right, because setting these materials up is going to take you, depending on how much work you do, it's going to take you some time to do it. All right. So coming back to this PT1 Classic Ivory, so we finished in this area here. Back to graphics, just tick render appearance. And the only other thing I'll get you to do is actually go down to cut pattern, click on the swatch here for foreground, scroll up to the top and select none, no pattern. Okay. So we'll apply on that one. I might actually go OK just to make sure it's all saved, and I'll come back in. And it's always a good idea to make sure that the material is still there, check all the settings, it's all OK, nothing's changed. Go back up here, do a search for CPT, make sure your carpet materials are all OK. Okay. Sometimes you may not remember to click OK. You might click cancel. You might hit escape. It'll drop you out. You think you've created these materials. They're suddenly not there. You'll have to do them again. All right. So if you're OK with that, so the paint material is quite straightforward. I think it is anyway. So with your paint materials, like I said, there are 4 other paint colours to create within this exercise, so I'll actually get you to do them in your own time. What I'd like to do is move on to have a look at creating the first of the tile materials. Yes?
Russell, CPT, at some time, no, that's a carpet material, right? The paint material that we've just put in
PT, yes.
PT1, at some time through the process, we should have allocated it to be a paint material, wasn't it? Or a wall paint.
We actually brought in an appearance asset that was based on wall paint.
Okay, because if I'm looking at my project materials, and I mean it's there, but it's not under a heading, so there's no materials in this document when I'm looking for materials paint.
Okay, all right, I'll pop over and have a look. Yeah.
You want to go to identity and change the class name. That's what.
Just check you haven't got the class set to. Or paint will show up your paint. The class of carpet will show you carpet materials. Just have that set to all, just so that you, when you're doing a search for the first part of that material name, that those materials will actually show in the project or the document.
Russell, the
yes.
on PTT2, the steel paint finish ivory, I can't find in the library.
So, so PTT2 should be duplicated from steel paint finish ivory matte.
You look at the page 30, Gary. That's a whole list of them. You don't even need to access the catalog on the website. You can just use them.
Now this is from in Revit.
Okay, so when it comes time to create the second of the paint materials, I'll just expand this dialogue. So the person who has written this particular exercise is suggesting that if you're producing a paint that's designed to go onto a metal product, that you perhaps look for a material that is already set up for metal. So they're saying, okay, well, look for, so PTT2 should be duplicated from steel paint finish ivory matte. So if we do a search for that up here, steel paint, take that out, steel paint finish ivory matte. So it will actually appear, or should appear, in the Autodesk library down here under AEC materials and metal. So it's that one there. So you're going to have to find it in the list there and load it in first before you can use it. Does that make sense? Are you still having trouble, Gary?
That's all right.
You found it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's two search results from the material and the one under.
Yeah, you've got to make sure that you can actually see this area down here, and that's this box here. Okay. Draw it up so you can, and then sort of, make this box as big as you need to make it, so that you can see what's going on. Okay. So that when you're searching up here, you can see if it pops up here, if it's already in the project, it'll come up here.
Oh, yeah.
All right. If it's not in the project, it should come up here, if it exists. So this is part of one of the standard Autodesk materials from the external libraries. Okay. So what they're suggesting is that for PTT2, start with that material and copy it, load it in, copy it. PT3 should be duplicated from gypsum ceiling board, so that already exists in the project. Paint colours 4 and 5 are copied or duplicated from the first one, which is PT1. If that makes sense. Yep. So when you do this for yourself, just make sure you go through and copy the correct ones. Okay. So I guess in the remaining time we have in today's session, what I'd like to do is actually move forward now to exercise 4-4, which is having a look at Revit Materials Concepts Applied Part 2, and in particular in producing this first ceramic tile material called CT1. All right, so that's that's intended for the shower wall tiles. It's from a company called Dal Tile, and the product is X735 almond. All right. It also has a grout called light chocolate, and they're also providing the colour for the grout there at 9977.61. Now, is everyone okay with the paint colours that we or the paint colour we just produced? All good with that? Good. Okay. All right. So for this next part, to set this up, we'll see how far we get in the remaining 10 minutes. So open the material browser dialog in Revit, filter the material list by class and choose ceramic. You'll see two materials, ceramic tile 4-inch blue and porcelain ivory. Now you're going to make a copy of ceramic tile 4-inch blue, and you're going to call it CT1. Okay, so just locate those two tile materials. This is the one we're working with. So is everyone okay with that? Everyone found that one? So I'm locating these two by actually changing the class to and choosing ceramic. So I'm not doing a search up here, I'm just actually finding them by changing the class. So with this one, you'll need to make a copy of it and call it CT1. So what should we do next? Well, I think what the exercise calls for is to actually again, and I'll just switch to that. So what we need to do is again, so as with the carpet and the paint, we need to actually just go off and have a look at the manufacturer's website, which is daltile.com. Easier just to highlight the URL and do a Control-C. Note what we're searching for, X735. Okay, so this is another US-based company that manufactures and distributes tiles, ceramic tiles, called Daltile. If we go, just enter into here, find into this search box where it says find tile, stone tips and resources. And type in X735. How are we going with that? We've got these samples come up. Now, the one we're looking for is Matte Almond 735. Now, there's actually 3 of them, but we're looking for. There was one here for. I'm sure there was one for bath accessories. So this one here.
That one is semi-gloss though.
So click on the matte option via the matte wall tile preview.
I think that website would change.
I went for this one. It's not life and death, okay. There's that's the accessories themselves. There's the tile down there. That's the tile itself. So the thing is that when you're creating a material for the purpose of tiling, there's a couple of options. You could perhaps find photograph of the tile with the correct colour. Now the thing is that when you are looking for exact photographs of these products, it's important that the photograph itself has no apparent shading, as in no shadowing from a light source. Because if you can appreciate that, you know, depending on the size of this tile, it says it's in imperial, so it's whatever it is, that size there. Let's get back to that. So if that tile, for instance, was maybe 200 mil by 200 mil, keeps changing. Yeah, so again, if you're going to use a photograph, you can appreciate that the tile itself, the photograph, when you actually incorporate a photograph of a tile or a brick, for instance, in a material in Revit or any other program, what the program does to create the illusion of continuity is it just repeats that particular tile in rows and columns. Okay. Now, if you're going to use a photograph of a tile and you're going to create the illusion of a tiled wall, ultimately, the tile itself is repeated, but if it's repeated side by side, above and below, what are you going to get?
A pattern of some sort.
Not even that. You'll get a single colour. Okay, because there's no provision for grouting. So if you're going to use a tile like this, a photograph, you're going to have to bring it into a program like Photoshop and add a grout line around it as a very thin border. Yes?
On some tile manufacturers' websites, they have like the tile already in like a 4x4 grid. Would you be able to use that picture, or would it still look like?
Yeah, yes, that's a very good point. Sometimes when you actually find a sample, a photograph to use in programs like this, they will provide a broader sample of the product in its repeating sort of situation. So, and it will include a grout line or grout lines. So you might get you might get maybe 4 tiles at least with grout lines between them. But it's important that you still get the grout line on the outside of at least 2 of them, or you know, it really, you have to think about, okay, well, if this particular photograph repeats itself left and right, up and down, am I going to see that grout line between all tiles? So you sort of get to these complexities of setting up a photograph within a material that when it's actually used and repeated, that it looks convincing. It's exactly the same with bricks with mortar, and it's particularly important with bricks, for instance, that obviously are offset in a typical bond pattern, that you get that offsetting. So it might be that it might actually just be easier to get one brick with mortar at the bottom and the right hand side, and then use that to repeat. Okay, so
What do you do? What do you do when they are in the irregular pattern? For example, like one in this photo on this website here, when the pattern are not, square on, it's like irregular.
Yeah, so if if you're getting this situation here where each tile has a different pattern, you would perhaps have to take grab a broader sample of it, large enough so that when you use this in your material and the broader snapshot is repeated, that it looks random. You're never going to get this perfect, but there are sort of techniques where you can actually randomize the sample so that when it does repeat, it is a little bit more convincing. And then this requires some skill in Photoshop. And it's not something that I cover in this course, okay? So there is some skill in this to actually get this randomized. And this is creating a tile material that is random is the hardest of all, okay? It's a bit like random stonework. To try and get that random look and to avoid the obvious situation where it's obvious that you've got the same image repeating itself over and over and it looks awful. Okay, so it's very difficult to do this. It can be done, but difficult to do. If you're trying to produce stonework, an image to be used for stonework, for instance, and you want to try and randomize it, there are lots of good YouTube videos on how to do it in Photoshop. Okay, so, but not something that I can take you through in the time that we have. All right, now it's just gone midday, so where we are with our material at the moment. So we've duplicated this one, we've created this one. That's where we'll actually stop at this point. So when we meet in a fortnight's time, we'll just finish off this particular material, and then we'll move on to the next topic. Okay. So in between, maybe could I ask you to just complete the carpet materials and complete the paint colours within this current project file. All right, just for homework. Okay, and as I say, we'll complete this tile one. We will then do a second tile material because the second tile material, both tile materials that we're creating will be created using completely different methods. All right, and I'll explain more when we actually come back in a fortnight's time. All right. So if you can apply and OK there. Just make sure you save your project file. And thank you everyone. I'll see you in a fortnight's time. All right. So good. Thank you.